Hey, welcome everybody. Today is Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. Happy holidays. And it's time for another episode of the Leadership Toolkit. My name is Mike. I will be your host. As you know, this is the Definitive Leadership Growth Podcast, and I have the opportunity to meet amazing leaders and managers and business owners, entrepreneurs, people that lead from the front, people that lead from the middle, people that push from the back every single week. And I like to have these conversations and bring them to you so that you have the opportunity to grow and learn from successes. And as I always say, we learn from failures too, because people that are in leadership roles, I find they love to share those roadblocks and say, hey, this is what stopped me, so don't let it stop you, and keep going. And it's awesome. So today is absolutely no different. We're going global. I've been going global this year. I've got the amazing Karen Ansen here. She's in Australia. And so I'll be bringing her on in just a moment. We're going to have an amazing conversation. I can tell it's going to be great already. She has the remarkable ability to make people feel seen, heard, and understood, even in the toughest workplace situation. She runs Ignite HR. She runs Ignite Your Purpose. And I have got her here on the Leadership Toolkit today. So Karen, thank you so much for making time and getting up way early in the morning to join me on the Leadership Toolkit.
It's 6 a.m. Yes. Yeah. But no, look, thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here.
Absolutely. Well, if you would, I always like to dive right in and talk a little bit about you. If you would share sort of what is your background? How did you get to where you are? What is your experience in leadership and management? And you brought to me a phenomenal topic to have some discussion on right out of the gate. But first, like I said, if you would share who you are and your background and such, Karen, I'd love to get to know you better.
So I am blessed to be the principal solicitor in my own firm. It's almost exactly 6 years to the day since I started my law firm, and yeah, I've had some interesting times in the last 6 years. I have to say, I did not want to go into business for myself. It was almost like I had no choice in the end. I worked with probably some of the most challenging leaders, managers you've ever come across in your life, I guess. And they served to make me stronger, I guess. But when I worked in the government for a long time, I had my children quite young, and I didn't do law until I was in my 40s. And I started out wanting to do law, I guess, like everyone does, to make some money. But it's been an incredible journey in terms of what I found is really, some of the most challenging but the most growing periods of my life. And I'm now the most authentic version of myself as a leader in my field, as a leader of people, and just leading other businesses, because part of my business I do outsourced HR. So that role in and of itself means that I have many clients where I have to take that leader driver role, because a lot of people find it very challenging to do it for themselves. So yeah, I do quite a few things. I do a lot of employment law matters in Australia, where they call it the Fair Work jurisdiction. So I run cases through the Fair Work matters, and also, as I said, outsourced HR. So managing all of the conflict that happens. I'm known, I guess, as by boards and in not-for-profits and things like that, as probably the guru or the go-to for the most difficult people that you'll ever meet, and basically moving through those challenges and getting out the other side without too much damage, I guess, in terms of legal ramifications.
Okay, so I'm curious as we get right in here. Thank you for sharing. And again, thank you for coming on the show early. When you say you're known for dealing with some of those clients or those people that may be the most difficult or the most difficult situations, are there maybe a couple things, certainly without giving away any, personal information, anything like, how do you define that as difficult, Karen? What makes it, well, hey, this is a difficult person? Are they just rude or mean, or is it something like, oh, I stepped on a frog and this is going to be a mistake? When you're saying difficult, because that can carry a really broad range.
Sure.
How do you mean? Can you narrow that down a little bit for me?
So I guess when I've always been a fixer. I guess that's my that's one of my things. And
That's
as a
good.
formed fixer, I realised that I have an insight into people that a lot of people don't have. And I mean, I probably should have been a psychologist. I don't know, but I kind of couple the idea that that most people who are in leadership or in management, most of their job is dealing with difficult people, right? They spend most of their time worrying or dealing with the most difficult people in their organization. And I guess when things get past the point of no return, often I'm the person that they ring. So, for example, a board knows that I'm known for managing difficult CEOs. For example, they've had a
Okay.
fall out with the CEO, and they're potentially litigious in some way. They're talking about, you know, making a claim against the company if they're terminated. So I manage those situations very carefully and are able to get people through those, navigate through that with the least amount of conflict, I guess, and also risk in terms of legal ramifications. Um, negotiating exits, that kind of thing. That's one of the things I do very well.
So when you have somebody that you come in and they say, "Hey, we've got this difficult CEO," and I know this isn't necessarily. Let me give the prelude, because one of the things that Karen and I for sure are going to get to. She had given me this and said, "Hey, the power of unofficial leadership." I'm saying that early, so we have to get to that because I think
Yes, we definitely
it's
will.
it's so I don't want to like that's one of the themes we want to get to. However, when I start talking to people and I start writing stuff down, Karen, I'm listening. And so like when you're saying, okay, hey, they bring me in as a fixer, and I have a certain view of that. You're that person that sort of patches things up, does that double negotiation, makes everybody happy on both sides and so forth. At least that's my sort of view. When you first are because I think you're right that people in leadership deal with a lot of difficult people and situations. Could you give me some insight, maybe two, three, four things that if you're going in, because I think leaders deal with that, and somebody with your experience and background, having dealt with it in a different sort of format, I guess, what advice would you give somebody? What are the first two, three, four things? Okay, I'm going into the situation. I know it's going to be a difficult situation. Here's these action items that I should execute on from a leadership standpoint. Could you give me some advice on that?
Sure. The biggest thing I find is that it's the fear of dealing with it. So that's the first thing, is people are frightened to deal with it. A, because there's going to be some kind of confrontation, and people for some reason in this day and age really don't like confrontation. They are happy to fight with each other online. They're happy to say whatever they like, when there's no person behind it. But the actual face-to-face conflict is terrifying for most people. People avoid it at all costs, right?
Sure.
And so, you have to be, I think healthy conflict is the only way to deal in terms of, if you have to have it in a healthy way and know what that looks like. And what that looks like is not, going into something with assumptions, making assumptions. Asking questions is always the best way to deal with things. And so, a lot of people go in and make assumptions about the way people have been acting, but check in with that person and say, look, I've seen you coming in late and you've had a lot of sick leave. I assume, whatever you're assuming about them. And so don't make that assumption. Just say, look, I've noticed you coming in late or whatever it is every day, and you had a lot of leave. Talk to me about that. What's going on for you? And if they are able to be honest enough with you, they may say, look, I've got something going on at home or whatever it is, it's not work. And that is the door, opening the door to having that really important conversation with people that needs to be had in a way that is not making assumptions about the way they're acting, because the worst thing you can do is say, oh, you're just lazy, you can't even get up in the morning, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, not people don't talk like that, but I'm just saying to you, it's one of those things, I guess, that you have to go in and be curious about what's going on. And people, when they're frightened of having a conflict or having a moment with someone that's really uncomfortable, is they try and get it done as quickly as possible. So prepare for that conversation. Have those. I when I'm in really difficult conversations with people, I say, look, I'm making an observation here about, you appear defensive. So what that looks like for me is that you have given me one word answers. Is that because you're uncomfortable in this conversation, or are you genuinely don't want to have this conversation with me? And we have to have it. So let's do it in a way that's respecting each other and each other's boundaries, and it's funny, I watch people when there's been a big clash between people and there's a lot of stuff that's been unsaid. I remember sitting around a table once, and it was actually with a board, and I was doing it wasn't officially mediation, and I don't think that they realized it was even going to be like that. And I walked in, and these people had a 25-year relationship with each other, and they were all sitting around the table. And I can't even remember what it was that I said. It was something that really triggered one of them, and all of a sudden, 25 years of pain from the way that this person had been treated for 25 years through this situation out on the table. It was, wow. And the honesty and the humility of that was overwhelming for the others. They were like, wow, we didn't see that. You never shared that before, and it was, I have this ability to be able to unpack that for people and give them the floor, give them the ability to share whatever that is in a safe environment, and not to be judged. I mean, in employment law, I have to deal with, you can imagine, everything from sexual harassment to, I've had to deal with, a religious organisation where there's rampant affairs going on, and
Jiminy Christmas. So here, this leads me to a couple other questions, Karen. This is how okay. So a couple things. One, I always like to recap for my audience, because I think and so that I'm understanding it correctly. And then you led me to another really good question here that I'm going to ask you here in just a moment, as you're talking, as I'm listening, because I do get curious about these things. So the question, I said, hey, when you're dealing with somebody difficult, where do you start? And I think you laid out a brilliant roadmap. Now, this is what I heard. So if I'm off base, you got to jump in and be like, no, that's not what I said, or that's not what I meant. That's okay. But one, and this is sort of the precursor, and I'm going to rearrange these a little bit just for the order that you said. Number one, how do we address or deal with difficult people or difficult situations? One is, you got to acknowledge that there is fear, and if you're fearful about this, then you've got to figure out why. I heard you pretty much say, and these weren't your words, but hey, basically just hit it head on. Like you're okay. If I gotta run through this wall, I gotta run hard at the wall. But fear is a funny thing, because almost all the time it's right in here. And once you get that stuff out on the table, it's not as real. One of the things that you did comment on as you were talking through that was, make sure as a leader, you got to slow down and prepare. So you repeat what you see. If somebody's showing up late all the time, hey, I see you're showing up late all the time, right? That'll help cut through the fear right away, because all you're doing is stating the obvious. You're stating the things that you see that perceptively are real to you. So slow down and prepare, repeat what you see to help break through that fear. Then those are all kind of number one. The second thing was, you said, ask questions to eliminate assumptions. I think that is so, so powerful. And folks, as you're listening to this, whether you're listening on an audio format, if you're watching us right now, whether it be live or later, write that one down, because I think there's so much practical application to that single statement. Ask questions to eliminate assumptions because so often we have our own perception. Like, this is where I'm looking, and so that's what I see, and that's what I believe. And if I don't slow down and ask questions of, Karen here, as we're talking, I can say, like, even as we're talking now and I'm sitting recapping, I'm saying, okay, so this is what I heard. If I'm off base, she could say, oh no, that's not quite it. So ask questions to eliminate assumptions. And the last thing you said without saying it, and that led you to your 25-year story there, is, as a leader, you have to listen. Like, you can't just
really
ask
listen.
questions. Yeah, really listen. You can't just ask the question and be like, well, okay, there it is. You got to actually slow down.
People don't listen to respond. They're waiting for the next thing they need to say, because they're already cued with all of the things that they wanted to say. So yes, right, okay, thank you. And then the next thing, it's not, you haven't heard. And if people are repeating themselves, they don't think you've heard them. And it's quite interesting that, the main thing that people also do in these situations is, how you get into an argument with somebody and you pick on something that's really triggered them. It could be, and a lot of the time it's something that's not concrete in terms of the way that you acted, and then they'll get defensive and they'll say, well, what about you? You don't even say good morning to me every morning when you come in. And I can almost see the script every single time I do one of these, where there's this moment where they just want to be heard, I guess, but it's kind of, I'm going to throw something at you because you've now hurt me. So try and deal with the concrete things. Don't deal with the some behaviors, for example. That's what I say to people when they come to me with these stories about, I've been, bullied or whatever it might be. And I say, okay, what are the actual, this is the definition of bullying, for example. What are the things that fit inside that, if that makes sense? So, don't pick on things that can be thrown back at you. And if you are going down that path, there's someone saying to you, well, you don't say good morning to me every morning, you walk past me and ignore me. So look, I'm sorry, I didn't know I was doing that. Instead of going, oh no, I don't. The other morning I stopped and asked you if you needed coffee or whatever. There's always this kind of tit for tat thing. Don't go down that road with people. As soon as you feel yourself going into that defense mode, you're actually not dealing with the issues. The actual issue is that I'm feeling unseen. I'm feeling unheard. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So you repeat it back to people and say, I hear you. You feel like I haven't seen you and I'm not acknowledging you. Is that what you're saying? And that stops it in its tracks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the interesting things is that there's still a level of care there. Like, your good morning and my can I get you coffee, we may think we're saying the same thing. Like, oh, can I get you coffee? That's caring of me. And you're saying, well, I just need you to say good morning. I don't need you to get me something. And so sometimes there's that just near miss that it's like, well, that's how I communicate versus how they communicate. And it's always, I've said it before, I think it was Tony Robbins I first heard quote it, that says, like, the power of communication is in the person receiving it, right? It's not what we think we said. One of the questions I want to ask here, Karen, is because you commented, you said, hey, I'd been in this 25-year relationship. You went into the boardroom, had this 25-year business relationship with people, and all of a sudden you had said something and it triggered it, and that person sort of unloaded, and they're like, hey, we had no idea. Well, for that individual that had been in the business for 25 years, they may not have been communicating effectively. What do you think has somebody in that sort of position to put up walls like that?
It's a good question. I think, look, the only way I can describe it is from my own experience, is that over the years, I think you build up what's the word I want to use? It's more you make assumptions about things, and you try your hardest on every level. Anybody who's been through anything like that, you'll find that you have tried everything in your toolbox other than actually hitting the thing head on, because you think, if I say something, they're just gonna reject me, or I'm gonna, So rather than say something, you try everything else to try and resolve it, and it just doesn't work. So then you're back at square one again. I think that's it. But the other thing is, I've done a lot of self-development. I love Tony Robbins's. Have you ever done the morning ritual that he does?
The
Where
what ritual?
There's a morning ritual that he does, and he's puffs through it, because I do a lot of breath work. That's part of my other thing, breath work and meditation. And he does that thing where he does gratitude and sends love to everybody, and love. Or you start with some of the most beautiful experiences in your life. It's so powerful.
Yes,
the reason
gratitude's a powerful thing.
The reason that I mentioned that is because I didn't realize that I was running patterns in my subconscious from years and years and years ago of things that have happened to me, right? And so when you aren't hitting head on things, when you are unable to articulate what it is that's bothering you in a way that's safe and that you feel heard, often it's because of previous experiences where things have gone wrong, and you basically stop in your tracks saying, okay, it's not going to work, because your brain is constantly looking for things to save you, to keep you safe, right? So that's why your brain goes over and over and over again about, you can't deal with that, deal with it in this way. And then that builds up that frustration and that, resentment, I guess. And that's why people go into that place. And, it's interesting because we talk about the unofficial leaders. That was the topic that we were going to go into. It's quite interesting. I've seen people who are leaders, not officially, but they're leaders in an organization, for example. And I've seen them be absolutely crushed by organizations to the point where they just become underminers. When you look at the different things in HR and talking about, authenticity and how people are, operating at their highest in terms of their autonomy and things like that. But what happens to people is that they're running patterns. If they don't get acknowledgement, it depends on what it is that's their driver. If not getting that, then they become underminers, and they can be your worst ones, because often they're the loudest voice in the room sometimes, at times. And they can be really difficult to deal with.
They can move quickly from being your protagonist to your antagonist. Absolutely.
100%.
Couple of things here, pardon me, as we're about halfway through. And then I do want to shift gears to that, because I think it's super powerful. And thank you for entertaining my questions, because I know this is just how my brain works. Somebody hits on something, I go, that's really good. Let's talk about that. I love the fact that you said, and again, I encourage people to listen to podcasts, watch podcasts with a pen or pencil in your hand so that you can take notes. I'm a very much old school note taker person, because I think that, when you write it down, there's power in that. And one of the things that you just said there, because I was asking, hey, why do people put up these walls? And I think one of the most profound and just simple responses is you said, well, they do everything except saying the direct thing. And if you're in a leadership role, if you're in a management role, if you want to be in a leadership role, if you want to be in a management role, if you're in business, let's just say, if you're in business, just say the thing, so long as it's not against HR and one of those, like if there's something that's bothersome, just formulate a tactful way to say it and just be direct. I think there's so much power in you sharing that, Karen.
And the thing is, it's the thought of it's got more fear around it than the actual event.
Absolutely. Every time. So a couple things, because I always get to this point and I realize I've had this on the screen a few times, but if you are watching or listening, and I always try and spell these out, a few things I would definitely recommend: connect with Karen on LinkedIn. If you go to linkedin.com/in Karen Ansen. It's KarenAnsen. So you can connect with her on LinkedIn. Certainly check out her website at ignitehr.com.au. Spelled just like that. There's no spaces. Ignite, IGNITE, hr.com.au, because she's in Australia. And then also, when we haven't talked about a whole lot, is Ignite Your Purpose. And if you would you expand on what is Ignite Your Purpose? Expand on that for me a little bit, Karen.
So, like yourself, I realized that leaders often came from the space where they weren't originally leaders. They're very good at what they do, and then they've been promoted to that leadership role. And, they get into that leadership role and don't actually know how that is. A lot of people, for example, when I became a lawyer, I had this picture in my head of what a lawyer was supposed to be. And it certainly isn't the version of who I am today, that's for sure. And it's hard to be authentic. It's hard to be, because a lot of leaders decide, okay, I'm just going to be everyone's friend, for example. Now, that doesn't work.
That doesn't work.
But no. So what I did was I started Ignite Your Purpose, because the journey that I've been on as a leader in my field and in businesses, other people's businesses, and in my own business, was that I realized I was not authentic. I was people pleasing. I was often avoidant of conversations. Even though I do it for everyone else, I didn't know how to do it for myself. I often let people walk over me. I didn't often. It was interesting because I didn't realize that it was as difficult as it was, I guess, and
Sure.
and avoiding those conversations for example, when I worked for other people, and not being able to even ask for pay rises and things like that. Like, I've always been someone who just is good at my job, but didn't know how to lead people. And I guess that's the journey that I've been on with Ignite Your Purpose, is to support leaders to become that authentic version of themselves, but to understand what it is that they need with running the old patterns, for example, the people pleasing or the authoritarian thing. If you're overly authoritarian and you're I work with a lot of drivers, a lot of people, particularly men, that fall into that driver space. Very, very good at getting projects done, not overly good at the people part, and they wonder why they have so many problems because
Sure.
all they can see is the outcomes, right? And they forget that there's people involved in this, and that people need to be seen and heard and understood and have their part of the process, to understand how they fit inside something, have the communication right, that kind of thing. So how to have those conversations, how to have difficult conversations. So all of that. But, there's also some breath work and meditation involved in my Ignite Your Purpose stuff, because
Sure.
it's absolutely transformed my life. There's no question about it.
So let's move into that segment and talk about unofficial leaders. First, if you would do me a favor, and because one of my favorite definitions of leadership in general comes from John Maxwell, where he's like, look, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less, right?
Correct.
If you have influence. So when we talk about unofficial leaders or people that are leading without a title, can you define that and flesh that out a little bit for me?
So, I mean, again, I guess I reflect on my own journey and how I came to understanding that, because, I was always, with the DISC profile, I did sit very much in that in the influencer space. And, I realized that in an organization, when I remember the last time I did the mail for an organization that I was working with, I thought, I finally made it. I don't have to do the mail anymore.
That's funny.
But it was quite funny because I've come along a long journey in terms of where I've been and where I am now. But I was always the person that had an idea, that was able to motivate people, that was able to, to cut through something, ask the right questions, are able to set the tone for the culture of the organizations that I worked in. People look to me for the answers, look to me for, problems that they didn't know how to fix, and relationships that they didn't know how to, so those people in your organization, and you can spot them. They're there, they show up, they're positive, they're motivational, they're, they want to be there, they love what they do generally, and they're very open and transparent about how they feel about things, and you can trust them in terms of, giving you feedback. And I've always been one of those people that managed up, I guess. And I don't think it's interesting. I don't think the younger generation understands that these days, that there is an element of that there is the taking responsibility. I'm not saying they don't take responsibility, but taking that, initiative on things. A lot of people need a lot of direction, I've found, after employing a lot of people, and that's just,
Sure.
no, I think we've raised our children differently. And I think we had to do the school of hard knocks to get to where we are in
Very
a lot of
much.
respects. And so, you have to be resilient is the word, resilient, And so, yeah, that's my experience as an unofficial leader, and having been that person in an organization and seeing them in other organizations. Yeah.
So how do you, when we're talking about those unofficial leaders, the people that are the middle of the organization but carry influence, the people that, as you were saying, others kind of turn to for guidance and opinion, and you mentioned some ways to spot them, like they're upbeat, they actually like the organization, they're transparent, you feel
Yes.
that they're charismatic, right?
Yes.
You feel that there's a level of trust without having to have that deep relationship. You can see that, and most people, I think, as we have this conversation, they go, oh yeah, I know somebody like that in my organization, or I've worked with somebody like that, or maybe they're saying I am that person. Right? If
Yeah.
that's the case, how, if I'm the CEO of an organization, or a CTO, or a department manager, or I'm for lack of a better term, Karen, let's say I'm a titled leader, right? Not
Yeah.
entitled, but a titled leader. Meaning
Yeah.
I carry a manager title or whatnot, and I'm in a leadership role for the company. How can I help to extract the best in those unofficial leaders? How can I empower them? How can I tap into their strengths so that they can run alongside you and they get other people? Because those are the people that always have the influence. Like, if you're going to make the change in the company, I've been in this. I'm sorry, I asked the question and then I'm venturing
And
off. I got to finish this
no,
thought.
you you're
Those are the
fine.
those are the people that are like, for me in my career, they're always the ones that I would run the idea by first, because if
Correct.
I got buy-in from them, then they're like, yeah, okay, yeah, I could release that. If I didn't, then I'm like, oh, I might want to slow down and rework that. So how can I help to empower that level of person so that I can help pull them up, and then they can run alongside me as a leader or manager?
It's interesting because a lot of people don't put a lot of stake in this, in HR and understanding people, because they're so worried about the bottom line all the time. It's always about the outcomes, and not understanding the people part of it. If you've got high turnover, if you've got, sick leave, high sick leave, you've got cultural problems. So use those people, those unofficial leaders, to be able to, as you said, run ideas by, make sure that that they understand that they're valued, that that you see them in terms of how they affect the culture in the organization, and allow them to do what they do, and acknowledge it, that it's important what they do, and yeah, I mean, have them involved. If you've got a big organization, have them involved in, your committees, and if you're doing culture reviews, and the way that you promote the organization in terms of of your values and things like that. Meaningful things. Have people involved, that these leaders, the people that haven't got a title, involved in that part of it, because they see things and they are absolutely able to support. Because otherwise, it's not meaningful. If you've got values and they're not actually authentic for the organisation, who's I mean, if you ask most people, what are your values? Like, they wouldn't have a clue. And what's the point of them if they're not authentic for your organisation, and they're not meaningful? So those are the types of things that you would do. I mean, I'll give you an example. The very first job I had out of law school was with an aged care organisation. It was funny. The lady that employed me said, "Oh, come to aged care. You'll always have a job. It's a growth industry." Because we're just about to explode, right? In Australia, we need double the aged care beds in the next 5 years, because it's out of control. Oh, it's out of control. It's like and they've not built a new aged care facility in the last 10 years. Basically, so we're in a crisis at the moment in Australia in terms of aged care. But when I joined the organisation, it was just the building was terrible, the facade was terrible. They had terrible, they were trying to sell bloody all these training courses and all this kind of stuff. And I remember going to Charles, the CEO at the time, and saying, "You just need to upgrade this place. You need to do, all sorts of things." And there was this part of the organisation, and these poor people, a lot of them non-English speaking background, they were doing the payroll, right? And they were the most nobody bothered with them. No one helped them. No one heard them. They were just working, doing all these long hours and everything. And I remember going to Charles and saying, "Listen, those people you need to actually sit and do a culture review with these people and find out what's going on, because honest to God, I'm telling you, they need a voice, because I know they're not happy." And so what I did, not only was I doing my first year out of law school and working with a barrister and running, heaps of unfair dismissals and doing all that, I completely overhauled the entire office. We did a brand new yeah, I was ringing contractors, and I did their training, redid their training room, all the furniture. I got the organisation from the perspective of the people that were doing the payroll part. They had that. I got one of their unofficial leaders to come forward and talk about what they needed. And yeah, it was amazing. I was there probably a year, I reckon, and completely transformed the place in a year.
That's awesome.
What's
cool is he gave you the leeway.
It was amazing.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt there. No. Like, what's cool is he gave you the leeway to do that. There's a level of trust that, you want to do that? Go do that. That's cool.
He didn't know me from anybody. Yeah, it was just, and it was amazing. I had a great time. It was funny. And I was poached by the opposition, and they offered me more money a year later. And I went there. It was an interesting move, and it was the next 4 years was very challenging. But when I left, the payroll people all cried. They were hugging me.
Gosh.
Don't go. You need to stay.
I mean, that's one thing I want to touch on here. One thing I want to touch on that you shared, because you were talking about, hey, inviting people to the table, and that you were allowed to make moves, make changes, do those things. It's more than just, and I want people listening to hear this piece. It's more than just inviting someone to the table. They have to be allowed to be at the table. It's more than just like when there's, Karen, you're saying, oh, hey, yeah, they were going to let me transform the place. It's more than just saying it. It's allowing the actions and the follow-up and all of those things that are so important to actually take place. That's how you see real transformation in business. It's like, okay, hey, yeah, I'm going to get your ideas. I'll write those down and then never execute on them. Like, we see that happen all the time. But if you're going to take the time to talk with those unofficial leaders, if you're the people that don't have the title, allow them to make changes, allow them to take action, allow them to be a part of the culture shift.
Absolutely. And it's quite interesting that one of the things that I did, I work with a lot of disability organisations as well,
Hmm.
and I remember, and the leader there, she's a director, she's a managing director. I said to her, "Have you ever picked the phone up and rung your carers and asked them how they are, how they're doing?" She said, "No." I said, "Okay, we're going to do that for the next week." She had 200 staff. And we spent the next week ringing each of them and asking them what they thought. And what we did was we transformed the organisation in terms of their structure. So we put the carers at the top of their structure. They were the most important because without them, you've got no one, right?
Right.
And the managing director was at the bottom. So they managed up in terms of how their whole structure
Interesting.
worked. And it was the focus of the organisation completely changed in terms of their importance and their voice. Because, they, for example, they didn't even know, they used to ring the rosters people. This is one thing
Mhm.
that I figured out when I used to ring them. If for anything, it didn't matter what it was. If they needed something, they would ring the rosters people. Well, what the hell are the rosters people going to do? Like they had no voice to be able to get information back. No good news stories. They were out there in the community, and they were all over Australia. This organisation was sitting in Sydney, and they were everywhere. They were in bloody Timbuktu, and they were all over the place, And that's an actual place, by the way, Timbuktu.
Yeah, Timbuktu. Yeah, it's an expression for us here in the States.
Yeah, it's an actual place here. Um,
Yeah, that's funny.
and so, they were everywhere. And it was one of those things where she just went, "Oh my God, Karen, like I don't even know what we were doing." Because they were out there doing all these amazing things. There was never any good news. But you should see now how that organisation's transformed in terms of their social media, in terms of the messaging, in terms of the way that they operate is completely changed. And it was just one simple thing. Let's pick the phone up and ring your staff and see how they're doing.
Right.
Any feedback they've got. It was
Well, you can be
incredible.
doing. There's a couple other just tidbits that I picked up. Like you can be doing all the good in the world
Yeah,
within the organization or whatnot, but if nobody knows about it, you're not going to change a culture.
correct.
The other thing
What
is, like, as you were, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Now, what's that show in the US where the managing directors go and they pretend to be a worker?
Oh, Undercover Boss.
I love that bloody show. I love it.
Yeah. Yep. I've seen a few. Some of them seem a little bit set up, but some of them are yeah, no, I mean, I love the whole premise behind it to
Yeah,
go see on how all that works. So,
yeah.
well, hey, as we're coming to the tail end here, a couple of things. One, I'm going to ask you for any final thoughts, so I'll give you a moment to think about that as I'm taking us out. A couple of things. If you're whether you're listening or whether you're watching, please connect with Karen on LinkedIn. Just a wealth of knowledge and a joy to talk to. I mean, I've really enjoyed this conversation, Karen, and getting to know you and talking leadership. And I think just you brought such a valuable point of like people do need to be seen. They need to be seen. They need to be heard. They need to feel that way more than anything. It's not enough for us to think we're seeing or hearing people, but they need to have that feeling from you as a leader and a manager. So connect with Karen on LinkedIn. It's Karen Ansen, KarenAnsen. Also, you can check out her website at ignitehr.com.au. And last one I've got to share here today, and I'll share all these links as well in the show notes and such, everyone. But make sure that you can check out Ignite Your Purpose. I've got that listed here on showcased on LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/showcase/ignite your purpose. And you can connect with her in all of those three ways. And again, they'll be in the show notes and the descriptions for each of these. I'm just very grateful to have had this conversation and just walking through, how to deal with difficult people, how to build a culture through some unofficial leaders. And you've had just such a wealth of knowledge. I'm very, very thankful to have had the conversation today. So Karen, any final thoughts you'd like to take us out with on the show today?
Oh, look, I just really appreciate how easy you are to talk to, and I've
Thank you.
really enjoyed it myself. And it's a topic that that people, as you said, just need just need some guidance, and things will have dropped in through this conversation, and it'll give people ideas. Even if there's this one thing that you take away from that, saying, okay, today I'm going to acknowledge my unofficial leader, or whatever that might be, and it's a feel good thing. We talked a little bit about gratitude. Gratitude changes everything, and acknowledgement changes everything. So, one good thing today, if you're feeling like you're, just overwhelmed this time of year, everyone wants everything yesterday, don't they? It's just,
That's for
and
sure.
you've got I've got 7 days and I'll be on holidays. And, what I'm doing at the moment is leading myself through this process the next week, and basically not trying. I'm using positive I statements. I am going to get through it without too much stress. So, yeah, that's my only message to people today.
I love that. Karen, thank you so much. If you would hang out for just a minute, I'm going to go ahead and take us out and close out. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to bring us to a close for another amazing episode of the Leadership Toolkit. I encourage you, please connect with Karen Ansen. Check out her websites. Make sure and check these show notes, because again, she shared so many good just tidbits on how to have a culture shift, how to acknowledge people, how to work with and see those unofficial leaders. It's just absolute gold. So that's all I got to say. So I encourage you, everybody, please, connect with her. Couple of asks that I always have, 2 or 3. One of the ways that these podcasts and shows grow is, when you engage with them. So throw some thumbs up on there, make sure and share them with people if you find some value in this. And then certainly, most importantly, if you know somebody that needs to hear this message, maybe you've got an unofficial leader in your organization that really wants to move into getting an official title. And one of these things could be something that Karen shared of, okay, hey, I need to start doing this. I need to start acknowledging these other people. Yeah, I do need to look for an invite to the table, and so that I can move into these other roles and so forth. Or maybe you have an official leader that really needs to hear some of those being seen and heard pieces. Share this show with them. That's what the goal is. Impact one person. You've got a whole different circle of influence, certainly, than I do or than Karen does, and share the show so that they have an opportunity to grow. And certainly, last but not least, if you know of anybody that needs a leadership consultant or leadership speaker, or would like to come on this podcast, make sure you connect with me. You can email me at mike@leadtheteam.net. Till we speak next, everybody, stay great. We'll talk soon.